Somewhere deep within you exists an iteration of yourself that remains completely unknown to your current consciousness. This alternate self operates with surgical precision, ice-cold calculation, and a relentless consistency that would render you unrecognizable if confronted today. The meeting would not inspire admiration, but rather instill a primal sense of dread. Society perpetuates a fundamental misunderstanding about what genuine discipline truly represents, reducing it to superficial rituals like early morning alarms or restrictive dietary choices or extended work sessions. This perception misses the mark entirely. Authentic discipline transcends mere behavioral patterns and enters the realm of psychological warfare waged against the fragile territories of your own internal resistance. It demands the capacity to observe your fluctuating emotional landscape, acknowledge your physical exhaustion, catalogue your elaborate justifications, and systematically eliminate each one without remorse or hesitation. The great strategists throughout history understood this principle intimately, crafting their philosophies not for the morally righteous, but for those willing to grasp the mechanisms of sustained power in an inherently unstable world. When transformation reaches its ultimate stage and discipline becomes your default operating system, the social dynamics surrounding you undergo a radical shift that extends far beyond simple admiration or respect. People begin experiencing an uncomfortable tension in your presence, detecting something fundamentally altered in your energetic signature that suggests you have severed the invisible strings through which they once exerted influence over your decisions and behaviors. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. The architecture of strategic silence. The ancient texts remind us that perception forms the battleground where most conflicts are won or lost long before any visible action occurs. The vast majority of individuals conduct their lives as open manuscripts, broadcasting their intentions across every available platform, announcing transformative journeys before completing even a single meaningful step toward actualization. This premature revelation serves as a pressure release mechanism that dissipates the very energy required for genuine implementation. Social media platforms overflow with declarations of personal revolution posted by those who will abandon their commitments within 72 hours, seeking external validation as a substitute for internal transformation. The pattern repeats endlessly because they fundamentally misunderstand the relationship between silence and power. Your alternative approach must embrace opacity as a strategic asset, rather than viewing it as antisocial behavior. Genuine transformation requires operational security, the deliberate construction of a protective barrier between your developing capabilities and the corrosive influence of premature scrutiny. Every time you verbalize an unrealized intention, you unconsciously seek permission from an audience utterly unqualified to grant it, essentially asking strangers whether they approve of your evolution into something greater than your current form. This submission to external judgment must cease immediately if you intend to access your full potential. The truly formidable presence in any environment is invariably the individual who maintains observational discipline, gathering intelligence through careful attention while revealing nothing of substance about their internal processes or future movements. Strategic silence creates a psychological vacuum that triggers anxiety in those accustomed to reading and manipulating others through their verbal disclosures and emotional displays. When you withdraw from the constant communication stream that defines modern social interaction, people begin projecting their own insecurities onto your mysterious absence, constructing elaborate narratives to explain why you no longer require their attention or approval. This uncomfortable uncertainty becomes your protective shield, safeguarding your true objectives from interference. Operating beneath the radar of public awareness grants you an invaluable gift: the freedom to fail privately, to experiment without judgment, to refine your methods through trial and error, while avoiding the paralysis that comes from performing your development process for an audience of critics. Consider the transformative power of a complete withdrawal lasting half a year, disappearing entirely from social circulation without explanation or apology, dedicating yourself exclusively to the fundamental pillars of physical conditioning, skill development, financial growth, and psychological fortification. This period demands the elimination of shallow dopamine sources, the severing of relationships that only function in contexts of mutual self-destruction, and the cultivation of an inner fortress built from repetitive action rather than motivational rhetoric. When you eventually re-emerge into social spaces, the contrast speaks volumes without requiring verbal announcement or explanation. Your physical presence carries different weight, your movements suggest refined purpose, your silence communicates more effectively than the desperate verbal overflow that characterizes those still seeking external validation for internal emptiness. This is the discipline that disturbs comfortable mediocrity, serving as an uncomfortable reminder that focused dedication produces tangible results, while scattered attention produces only elaborate justifications for continued stagnation. Begin implementing this principle immediately by refusing to explain or justify your choices to those who have not earned the right to question them. Explanation functions as the native language of victimhood, while power expresses itself through execution rather than justification. When fatigue threatens your resolve, maintain silence and continue working. When emotional pain demands acknowledgement, process it privately and continue healing. When success arrives, resist the urge to announce it and simply continue building. Your accumulated results will eventually speak on your behalf, and their testimony will resonate with far greater impact than any premature self-promotion could achieve. But here's what most people will never understand about this path, and it might be the most crucial element of all. The transmutation of emotional states into fuel a pervasive myth suggests that highly disciplined individuals operate as emotionless machines, somehow exempt from the full spectrum of human feeling that affects ordinary people. This represents a dangerous mischaracterization that prevents many from pursuing genuine transformation because they believe it requires becoming something less than human. The reality operates quite differently. The individual who has mastered self-governance experiences the complete range of human emotion with even greater intensity precisely because they are not constantly medicating themselves with distraction and comfort. They feel the magnetic pull of extended sleep, the sharp sting of social rejection, the crushing weight of doubt, and the overwhelming temptation to abandon difficult pursuits in favor of immediate gratification. The crucial distinction lies not in the presence or absence of these feelings, but rather in their complete irrelevance to the decision-making process. Historical strategists recognize that human motivation operates through two primary channels: the attraction toward desired outcomes and the aversion away from feared consequences. This principle must be applied internally with ruthless consistency. You cannot construct a sustainable system based on loving every aspect of your required actions, because passion fluctuates wildly based on circumstance, environment, and neurochemical states beyond your conscious control. Relying on emotional alignment before taking necessary action creates a fundamental vulnerability that guarantees eventual failure. Discipline represents the systematic practice of acting in direct contradiction to your immediate emotional state, essentially performing emotional alchemy by transforming the base material of resistance and reluctance into the refined gold of completed action, regardless of how you felt during execution. The moment you cease consulting your feelings before implementing necessary behaviors, you become a fundamentally unpredictable force that cannot be easily manipulated or neutralized by external circumstances. Strategic thinking reveals this principle clearly. If your opposition understands that you only function effectively when experiencing positive emotional states, they simply need to wait for inevitable periods of sadness, exhaustion, or discouragement, and you become completely defenseless during those windows of vulnerability. However, if you develop a reputation for intensifying your efforts precisely when circumstances deteriorate, for training harder in response to heartbreak, for focusing more deeply when anger threatens to derail your concentration, you transform into something that cannot be easily categorized or countered. This unpredictability generates a specific type of social discomfort, as people observe your continued function despite circumstances that would immobilize ordinary individuals, unable to comprehend how you maintain forward momentum when you should logically be incapacitated by your situation. The explanation they cannot grasp. is that you have successfully decoupled your action-taking mechanism from your emotional weather patterns. You learn to treat feelings as you would treat meteorological conditions. You acknowledge their presence, noting that a storm currently rages, but you do not cancel your mission simply because rain falls from the sky. Instead, you make appropriate adjustments to your equipment and continue moving toward your objective regardless of atmospheric conditions. This represents the application of strategic philosophy to internal governance, positioning yourself as the ruler of your psychological kingdom while treating emotions as subjects who may voice their concerns but never determine policy. When internal resistance organizes a rebellion against your established protocols, you crush that uprising without negotiation or compromise. Start practicing the 3-second decision window that bypasses your brain's sophisticated negotiation and rationalization systems. When your alarm triggers, you have exactly 3 seconds to initiate movement. Allowing a 4th second invites your survival-oriented neurology to construct elaborate justifications for remaining in comfort, because your brain evolved to conserve energy and avoid discomfort, not to pursue excellence or achievement. You must bypass the internal negotiation entirely. Count to 3 and move your body before thought can intervene. Thinking becomes the enemy of execution during crucial decision points. During moments of weakness, simply initiate physical movement without engaging the deliberative process. Your body must learn to obey commands regardless of accompanying emotional states. If you found this perspective valuable, consider sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. If this video awakens something within you, it's because there are truths about Jesus that were never meant for the masses. The ebook, Jesus Beyond the Church, reveals what was removed, burned, and rewritten, erased teachings, silenced texts, and spiritual codes that survived outside institutional control. This is not a religious book. It is a record of what was left outside the church and of what you were never meant to find. For a limited time, you will receive 3 exclusive super bonuses, unlocked only for those who access it now. The link is in the pinned comment. If you made it this far, it may not be a coincidence. Some truths reveal themselves only when we are ready. The strategic deployment of solitude historical analysis reveals that those who maintained power over extended periods often found themselves operating in isolation from the crowds they governed. Recognizing that true autonomy requires maintaining control over factors within your direct influence, rather than depending on variables controlled by others. Examine the 5 individuals who occupy the most time in your weekly schedule and evaluate them with brutal honesty. Are these relationships actively elevating your capabilities or simply providing comfortable familiarity? The majority of people experience profound terror when confronted with solitude, filling every moment of silence with podcast consumption, musical accompaniment, text message exchanges, or endless content scrolling. They cannot tolerate sitting alone with their unfiltered thoughts because those thoughts speak uncomfortable truths about wasted potential and unrealized capabilities. To develop the kind of discipline that generates social discomfort, you must not only accept isolation but actively seek it out, demonstrating willingness to distance yourself from relationships that do not serve your primary mission. This sounds unnecessarily harsh, and in many ways it absolutely is harsh, embodying a ruthless pragmatism that most people lack the courage to implement. But necessity overrides sentiment when you are serious about transformation, rather than simply performing the appearance of self-improvement for social approval. As you begin genuine ascension, people will attempt to anchor you to previous levels, not because they harbor malicious intent, but because your growth illuminates their stagnation in ways they find psychologically intolerable. Your transformation functions as a mirror, reflecting their own unrealized potential, and mirrors can be cruel. When you develop physical fitness, friends who have neglected their bodies feel implicitly judged by your presence. When you build financial independence, acquaintances who remain economically trapped interpret your success as a personal attack. They will deploy language designed to shame you back into conformity, suggesting that you have changed in negative ways, that you have become obsessed with meaningless pursuits, that you are no longer enjoyable company. This response should be received as confirmation that you are moving in the correct direction. Entertainment and leisure function as the primary distractions of mediocrity, and you have not dedicated yourself to this path in order to remain entertaining to those who have chosen comfort over growth. You must develop comfort with the role of antagonist in their personal narratives. Allow them to characterize you as cold, distant, and arrogant. Let them construct stories about how you now consider yourself superior to everyone around you. The truth is, you do not think you are better. You simply maintain standards that you refuse to compromise in order to make others feel comfortable about their own choices. Isolation serves as the laboratory where greatness is synthesized through experimentation and refinement. Within solitary spaces, you discover your authentic identity separate from the distorting influence of other people's projections and expectations. You begin hearing your own voice with clarity rather than the chorus of external opinions that typically drowns out internal wisdom. You must intentionally schedule extended periods of total withdrawal from normal social engagement, whatever terminology resonates with your understanding. Monk mode, deep work, focused isolation. Secure your environment, disable communication devices, and confront the work that matters. Within that confrontation, you will encounter psychological demons that have been hiding behind social distraction, boredom that tests your ability to generate internal motivation, anxiety that questions whether you are making correct choices, and you will engage these opponents in direct combat. Victory in these private battles produces a form of confidence that cannot be manufactured through external achievement or social validation, a bone-deep certainty that you can rely on yourself when isolated from all support systems. People detect this self-sufficiency in subtle ways that operate below conscious awareness, sensing someone who has become complete within themselves, rather than desperately seeking fulfillment through others. Paradoxically, this is precisely what makes such individuals magnetic, because they represent the only people not trying to extract something from those around them, operating from a place of internal abundance rather than desperate need. Take a moment and hit the like button if this resonates with something you've been feeling but couldn't articulate. Becoming unreadable. Through consistency, strategic texts from previous centuries advise that leaders should avoid becoming entirely predictable in their responses and behaviors, noting that generating fear proves more reliable than inspiring love, because affection depends on obligations that people break whenever convenient, while fear depends on consequences that remain consistently threatening. How does this principle translate to personal discipline and self-governance? When you operate without discipline, you become embarrassingly predictable to everyone observing your patterns. They know with certainty that you will abandon challenging pursuits, that you will complain when circumstances become uncomfortable, that sufficient pressure will cause you to collapse or compromise your stated values. You become easily manipulated because your weaknesses display themselves openly to anyone paying attention. The transformation into a disciplined individual makes you unreadable, a glitch in the social matrix that others rely on to predict and control behavior. You stop providing the expected reactions that people use to push your buttons and redirect your energy. Someone delivers an insult designed to provoke you, and instead of the anticipated anger, you offer a brief pause of acknowledgement before returning your attention to your work. A crisis emerges that would typically generate panic, and you respond with calm analysis rather than emotional chaos. Financial loss occurs, and rather than despair, you immediately shift into reconstruction mode. This absence of expected reaction creates profound discomfort in manipulative individuals who depend on your emotional volatility to maintain influence over your decisions and actions. Your developing consistency becomes a weapon precisely because it removes the control mechanisms that others have historically used to redirect your energy and resources toward their agendas. Imagine an individual who appears every single day, regardless of circumstances, who never complains about difficulty, who never seeks praise for effort, who simply executes required actions year after year without deviation. You cannot stop this person through discouragement. You cannot distract them with either temptation or threat. This represents a terrifying form of inevitability. like a natural force that simply continues regardless of opposition. This is the identity you must construct for yourself, becoming a presence that cannot be negotiated with, that does not respond to typical leverage points, that maintains forward progress with mechanical consistency. This does not require aggressive displays or confrontational behavior. It requires the implacable quality of geological forces that move slowly and silently, but crush everything in their path through sheer persistence over time. Achieving this state demands that you eliminate the part of your psychology that craves sympathy and external validation for your struggles. Stop broadcasting your problems to social audiences. Stop documenting your difficult days for public consumption. Stop seeking acknowledgement and praise for simply showing up to requirements you set for yourself. When you seek sympathy, you expose vulnerability and provide others with a precise map of where to attack if they decide you have become threatening to their interests or self-image. Strategic thinking suggests hiding your wounds not from shame, but from tactical awareness that you do not want to provide opponents with the satisfaction of knowing they have successfully inflicted damage. Maintain proper posture. Control your facial expressions. Move with obvious purpose and direction. Even when your internal world experiences chaos, you do not permit external observers to detect weakness or uncertainty. This is not deceptive performance, but rather tactical framing, deliberately shaping the reality that others perceive while maintaining your private truth internally. You are communicating a clear message to the world. I maintain control over myself and my circumstances, and any appearance of vulnerability you detect is something I have chosen to reveal, rather than something you have successfully extracted from me. But there's a deeper layer to this that separates those who merely perform discipline from those who embody it as their fundamental nature. Elevating standards. Beyond recognition, why does failure persist despite repeated attempts at transformation? The answer is uncomfortable. Your standards remain too low. You have internalized a version of reality where making an effort receives credit regardless of results, where approximate success counts as achievement. This must change at the foundational level. Historical empires that dominated their eras did not collapse primarily due to external conquest, but rather from internal decay. They lost the discipline that made them great in the first place. Luxury and comfort eroded their fundamental strength until they could no longer sustain the excellence that built their power. You currently exist in the most luxurious period in human history, surrounded by technologies and systems designed explicitly to make life effortless, climate-controlled environments, food delivered to your door with minimal effort, unlimited entertainment available instantly, substances and behaviors that provide artificial pleasure without requiring achievement. Everything in your environment is engineered to make you soft, to sedate your natural drive, to keep you comfortable and compliant. To maintain genuine discipline in this context represents an act of rebellion against the entire structure of modern society. You must consciously declare war on comfort itself, establishing standards that appear unreasonable or even extreme to everyone observing your choices. When people question why you wake before dawn, why you verify every detail with obsessive precision, why you refuse certain foods or activities that they consider harmless, the answer exists in a simple internal statement: I am not you. You do not speak this distinction aloud because it would be perceived as arrogance or superiority, but you live it consistently through your actions and choices. When you hold yourself to a standard of excellence that most people consider unnecessary or excessive, you inadvertently expose the mediocrity of everyone operating at normal levels. This is precisely why your discipline generates social discomfort and sometimes hostility. Your existence challenges their comfortable excuses and forces them to confront an uncomfortable question. If you can maintain these standards, why can't they? Rather than accept responsibility for their own choices, it becomes psychologically easier for them to label you as crazy, obsessed, or extreme rather than acknowledge their own laziness or lack of commitment. Allow them this comfortable fiction. The strategic individual does not lower their standards or compromise their excellence in order to be understood by those operating at lower levels. Instead, they force the world to rise and meet them at their elevated standard, or they simply move forward without those who cannot keep pace. You must become absolutely ruthless in how you value and protect your time, recognizing it as the only resource that cannot be regenerated once spent. Every second wasted in pointless arguments with unintelligent people, every minute lost to social media scrolling, every hour spent worrying about factors beyond your control represents time stolen directly from your future capabilities and achievements. Guard your time with the fierce protectiveness of a dragon defending its treasure hoard. Become inaccessible to time wasters. Keep communications brief and direct. When people realize that your time carries significant value and your attention is scarce, they stop wasting both. When they understand that access to you is rare, they begin valuing that access appropriately. Discipline creates scarcity in your availability and attention, and scarcity creates value in marketplace dynamics. By becoming so disciplined that your execution appears almost mechanical in its consistency, you elevate yourself entirely out of the competition bracket where most people struggle. The vast majority compete in the average range, where the crowd is dense and differentiation is difficult. The atmosphere becomes thin at elevated altitudes because few possess the capacity to function effectively there. Make the climb anyway. The perspective changes dramatically. The silence transforms. The quality of problems you face evolves into challenges that actually matter, rather than the trivial concerns that occupy most people's energy. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want more content that challenges you to think differently about potential. The necessary death of your former self. This final phase presents the most difficult challenge because it requires you to conduct a funeral for aspects of yourself that have defined your identity for years or even decades. To become the version of yourself that generates discomfort in others through sheer presence and capability, you must systematically destroy the person you have been. You must eliminate the version of yourself that desperately needs to be liked by everyone. You must kill the part of you that apologizes for having ambition or wanting more from life than comfortable mediocrity. You must examine your entire past, including every mistake, trauma, embarrassment, and failure, and then deliberately close and lock that door. Ancient wisdom reminds us that conflict cannot be avoided, only postponed, and postponement typically advantages your opponents rather than yourself. You are engaged in a war with your previous self, and if you do not achieve complete victory, that former version will sabotage your future potential. The old you will drag you back into familiar patterns. It will whisper seductive suggestions when difficulty increases. Just take a short break. Just one drink won't hurt. Just skip today and restart tomorrow. You must become ruthless in suppressing these voices because they represent the death of your potential. Think of this process as shedding a skin that no longer fits your expanding form. The process is painful, leaving you temporarily raw and vulnerable, but it represents the only path to continued growth and evolution. You might lose friendships that were built on shared dysfunction rather than mutual growth. You might lose a romantic relationship with someone who loved the comfortable version of you, but fears the powerful version you are becoming. You might be fundamentally misunderstood by family members who want you to remain the predictable person they think they know. This is the price you pay for pursuing greatness, the tax that comes due when you refuse to settle for ordinary existence. Do not complain about the cost, simply pay it and move forward. Because on the other side of that difficult death, a rebirth awaits, a version of yourself that is leaner, meaner, faster, and more capable. A version that operates on logic and strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction. A version that sees the world as a strategic game board rather than a playground for temporary pleasure. This new version of yourself is intimidating even to you, isn't it? That fear is appropriate because power always carries an element of danger. But understand the distinction. You are building power over yourself rather than power over others. Tyranny seeks to dominate external forces, but majesty comes from complete self-governance. When you enter any environment with total self-control, you vibrate at a frequency that others detect unconsciously. People instinctively yield space to you. They cannot articulate why, but they recognize on a primal level that you are not someone to be trifled with or disrespected. You carry a particular look in your eyes, the unmistakable signature of someone who has confronted the abyss of their own limitations and walked through that darkness to emerge stronger. Ancient philosophy recognized that the individual who conquers themselves achieves a greater victory than someone who conquers an entire city through military force. So what actually happens when you commit fully to this transformation? When you genuinely become this disciplined, the constant background noise that has buzzed through your consciousness for years gradually fades into silence. The anxiety that has flavored your daily experience begins to dissipate, because anxiety fundamentally stems from knowing you are unprepared for challenges you will inevitably face. From maintaining lies you tell yourself about your capabilities and commitment. When you become truly disciplined, you have nothing to hide from yourself. You know precisely who you are. You know exactly what you are capable of achieving. You stop fearing the future because you are actively constructing it through daily action. You stop fearing other people because you know with certainty that they cannot outwork you or outthink you when you are operating at full capacity. You stop fearing failure because you understand that failure is simply data informing your next attempt. You become free, but it is a cold freedom, a lonely freedom. It is the freedom of the wolf standing on the hilltop, looking down at the sheep huddled together in their pen. The sheep are warm, safe, and fed, but they are also trapped, their lives controlled entirely by external forces. You stand out in the cold, exposed to harsh elements, often hungry, but you are free to move in any direction you choose. This is the choice you must make today. Do you want the warmth and safety of the herd, or do you want the power and freedom of the hunt? You cannot have both simultaneously. These philosophies were often written during periods of exile and suffering, stripped of status, tortured by authorities, cast out from society. And in that darkness, words were written that would change how humans understand power and strategy for centuries. The author did not need applause or approval. They needed truth. Your discipline is your truth, the only thing that is genuinely and completely yours. They can take your money. They can take your job. They can take your reputation and social standing. But they cannot take your discipline. They cannot take your ability to endure difficulty and continue moving forward. That is your fortress. That is your throne. Listen carefully to this final message. The world is becoming softer, louder, and more chaotic with each passing year. This represents your strategic advantage. While they become weaker, you are systematically becoming harder. While they become more distracted, you are becoming more focused. While they seek comfort, you are actively seeking the edge where growth occurs. You are going to disturb them, not because you are trying to intimidate anyone, but because you function as a mirror reflecting everything they are too afraid to become. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them fear. You have important work to do. The path is cold. The path is steep. And you must walk it alone. But now you are ready. If you have made it this far, you are part of the 0.01%. You are the outlier. Prove it. Comment below. I choose the cold path. And if you want to continue this descent into the deep psychology of power, if you want to arm your mind with weapons they don't teach you in school, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We are just getting started. The old you is dead. Now go build the new one.